got it.
Kind of
Thank
like
you.
a training.
Okay.
So this isn't that green?
Evergreen teacher.
Evergreen?
It will be.
It's more for staff.
Just
Yeah.
internal, not the website.
Do you want me to introduce him in the video or are we fine? I don't know how you want it.
Yeah, go for it. Not bad.
If you do, just sit on the chair. But
And everybody else, let's give it a round.
Yeah. Let's.
Hey, give me a sec here. I'll tell you when.
I expect to feel like there's 500 people in this room excited. I can just adjust.
No, it's the microphone's in the
Oh.
frame.
Well, welcome, guys. We're so glad to have you joining us today for our Weddings and Funerals Officiating course. We are really blessed at this church to have our former lead pastor, Pastor Keith Smith, in this seat of training us and helping us along on this journey. And so I'm really excited for him to join us. He has led countless funerals, countless weddings. He has taken families through these really important processes in life. These are kind of moments where we're invited to really be a part of someone's family journey. We're able to speak into them in these moments. So I'm going to pray and then we'll get started. God, I thank you for our staff team. God, I thank you for having Pastor Keith with us today and his ability to help us learn to lead in these moments. I pray that you would use this teaching, God, to really help us to minister to the families that will come in contact with the individuals that we will meet along the journey. God, would you use us in this moment to learn so that we can be your hands and feet in the future? In your name, amen. So would you welcome Pastor Keith Smith with me this morning?
I was just talking to Pastor Stephen on our staff here. I was eating a sandwich just now, and you know how you have lettuce in the sandwich, and then you feel something on your tooth? And I thought, this thing's being videotaped, you know? So I was just in there checking to make sure. All right, why don't we look at funerals? You've got an outline there. Listen, the reason why I did it up this way, and this would be equally true for those who are joining by video at a later date. You know, I wanted to cover today pretty well everything that I know about it, just to help you have the best advantage from my mistakes and what I've learned over the years. And then, but you know, then I got thinking, before you guys do a wedding or officiate at a funeral, you're going to, you know, you need something more of an outline. So that's why I was a little more comprehensive in the outline, just because that's when you're going to find it most useful. You're not going to just sort of recall everything from today. And so if you're getting this online, you need to have. You'll be most helped if you have an outline, and then also a handout for each of the topics. So pastor people at funerals. It's interesting, you know, that I read twice, and not recently, but over the years, I haven't seen anything that would make me doubt it. And that is that people appreciate pastoral input at the time of a loss more than any other time. And, you know, we can think of logical reasons for that, right? You know, they're vulnerable. They're. It's such a moving time in life. Everything you say, just you know, when someone's down, and you say something that encourages, that encouragement wouldn't mean the same if they were just having a really good day, you know? So we can understand why, but the key word for funerals, as I've come to understand leading in them, is adaptation. Listen, the family dynamics can be so wide-ranging. And then, of course, the loss, the death, it can range from a tragic suicide to the celebration of a saint that's gone to be with Jesus. You know, so where would you ever find a range of need like that for you to respond to? I remember one, you know, I thought I'd seen it all. I remember right here sitting in the office, and a woman had made an appointment to see me. She said, "Pastor Keith, I'm dying. I want you to do my funeral." And, you know, nobody in the church knows. How are you going to say no to that, by the way? You know, you sort of makes an appointment, says that. Anyway, I went to the west side of the city. It was one of those times where you just felt parachuted in. There was maybe 8 or 9 people there, family-wise or whoever they were, and knew nothing, of the individual other than what she shared with me that day. There's just such a wide range. So to adapt is the key here. Now, here's what I love about funerals. You get the opportunity to comfort people at a time where they really appreciate it. Covered that. Secondly, you're communicating the Gospels to those who don't know it, but they're already in the life-death headspace. Right, thinking about that, here, loss. Oh boy, I guess that's going to happen to me. They're already there. If we did a church outreach, Pastor Jonathan, and we had 25 people that didn't know Jesus show up at it, we'd be saying, wow, that was very successful. We may have promoted it, put funds there, staff resources there. But at a funeral, it's not unusual for you to have over 100 unbelievers that are already in the headspace of where the gospel, the good news of Jesus, that he died and rose, again, there is an afterlife, it would be meaning so much to them. So I love those 2 big opportunities for funerals. Now, there are some uniquenesses of a funeral or a memorial gathering. The short prep time. Often you have a busy week. If you're a lead teaching pastor, you've already, and all of you have meetings, you have things already booked, and then this gets added in, and there's a lot to cover in a few days of preparing, in terms of the family and the funeral home, your involvement in it. So there's a short prep time. That's sort of a warning, I guess. And then there are these personal, emotional dynamics. People are in varying states and responses. I find that when you get into the way we respond when we have a loss, people are often still stuck in shock. Anger and denial get in there, but, there are other states that people are in at that time. And then family conflicts can be so exciting. I mean, it's stuff that, and you feel like you're walking on a landmine. There's areas that you go to in Israel, they say a warning, and they have these symbols on. You sort of feel like you're walking out there because you don't know what's going to set what off. You don't know who's getting along with who. You don't know who's been voted off the island. You just have absolutely no idea. And it can trigger stuff right in front of you. The family also can have unreasonable expectations, the size of crowd, the familiarity with songs by those attending, things like this. I remember this guy, he came from the United States, and his dad had been a minister for years, but most of his peers had passed away. And he came up from the States, and his dad, he thought, was really well known in Canada, and he wanted to have this huge funeral. He had these epic songs. I remember one of them was the Hallelujah chorus for the end, that we would play this and all this. Anyway, there was less than 50 people out there in that auditorium that can seat 2,000, Anyway, people can have quite the expectations, and they're emotional about it, right? So this makes it a little more difficult. Cultural uniquenesses often have emotional significance, especially for first generation people that are newer to the Lord, and then those they invite of the extended family that will be very aware of these cultural taboos or to-dos, and you're not. So, and then of course you're not planning a church gathering, so you don't have the same quality control. We'll get to tributes and songs in a moment. Anyway, contact with family. Your first contact, it should be, obviously, it's a pastoral care contact. I don't know how many times I've been told this over the years. Pastor Keith, I wasn't in when you called, but I played your message over and over and over again. Because they're low, right? And it just means it's like water on parched ground to just hear your comfort, so what a wonderful privilege you have at that time to just comfort. And then, but I put this in deliberately from experience: proceed gently, but with direction. If you let them spill out all their ideas and expectations. You're only going to put yourself in the losing position here. So arrange a meeting to plan the gathering. Your church office would be the best. Sometimes you go to the person's home, but sometimes what it does is it just makes it more likely that if there are family dynamics there, that they're more likely to come to the service. And so at the church, you have resources here. You can check with different ones on staff about policies or sound systems, this sort of thing. But here, this is so good. Let the funeral home care for as many logistics as possible. The bulletin, the obituary, many have website options for tributes. Let them, leverage that, because then you can focus on people and a meaningful gathering. That's the best contribution that you can make, not to just, the logistics are important, but these funeral homes do this all the time. It's their work. They have checklists, and they're not going to miss much, And of course, flowers on behalf of the church, or whatever is appropriate there. Then meetings with family reps. Usually there are representatives from the family. You don't meet with the whole family usually. And again, lead the meeting to spare awkward expectations. Lead the meeting. You beat them to, don't ask them what they're expecting or what they would like to do, because again, all you're going to do is set them up for disappointment, and they're at an emotionally vulnerable time. It's not a good time for that. You want to be helpful. So they can have 4 favorite hymns, 10 tributes. They can have, when did I write this anyway? Country music. Anyway, shape the expectations early in the meeting. So I tried to use some of the lines that I thought, okay, I put myself in that. I just thought, I'll just be as helpful as I can here. Here's what I usually start. Listen, I'll do my best to plan with you a service that really honors your, friend, your spouse, your child, whatever here. And then I'll try and say something early on. Funerals are usually about 25, 30 minutes. Now, I'm going to say to you, if they're a younger person, they're longer. And if it's a well-known person, they're longer. But I'm just saying in general here. Oh, and then often I'll say this. It'd be nice to have a couple of favorite songs. Did you notice the word couple in there? Because people will come with a whole list. They've sat down with the family and they've listed off all the favorite songs this person is, even into the realm of country music, So so here's some lines that I've used, if those attending don't know them. Oh yeah, they can be sung by vocalists. If they come with 4 favorites, usually you maybe only want 1, 2, or 3, depending on the length. But I'll say this, even if there's only time for a couple in the gathering, let's include the others as people are gathering and sitting there waiting for the service to start. That really goes across well, because again, people, they want solutions. It's not like they come in, they're not planning services.
Right.
They don't know how this works. So they're very open. And if you've loved them and cared for them already, they're open to trust your direction here. And then, and I'll say this, when it talks about tributes, don't say, how many people would you like to give tributes? Do not say that. No, just say something like, if you had to choose a couple or a few people to give tributes, who would be the best? And I always encourage people, start with the people that are going to be with that family for the long haul. Start with children, grandchildren, close friends, but be very, very, very careful that early in the planning, you do not put any of those children, grandchildren in a place where they feel totally uncomfortable, because watch this, they've already lost dad or grandpa or whatever, or grandma, or, what their auntie, their favorite auntie, they've already lost them, to make them feel like on that last goodbye occasion, they weren't up to even giving a tribute, So you have to just really handle it delicately there, and making sure that these, and you can even ask that, yeah, but would they be comfortable? Would they be comfortable? Because we'll get to it in a moment, but there's other things that they can do, like scripture reading, where it's already written down, or a written prayer, we'll come to that. But if they have a longish list of tribute makers, ask them, we're given three options here. Who would be best to say if there's a reception time? Because oftentimes there's this microphone at a reception time, or a family gathering after the funeral, or direct them to a post on the website. We'll come to helping out with people giving tributes, because they often make or break that kind of a gathering. And I said already that people that it'd be good to participate, but it's awkward for them. It's tough. Scripture reading or a written prayer can be good. I'd suggest going for the smaller, more intimate venue. We'll say the same when we come to weddings, but funeral homes are set up to do this. You know, a local church can do it. We have rooms, we have people we can bring in, but they're not doing this every day. And it takes so much off of your hands, because who are people going to run to if they run out of food, or if the coffee maker won't work or something? They're going to come to you, you know, because it's a small gathering usually, and and then you're not visiting with the family. You're not helping out with what you alone can do. Oh yeah. So what we found is that a lot of people chose to come for the visitation times, but due to family and work responsibilities aren't there for the service. You know, people often expect a whole crowd to come. You know, I remember back in the days when we had a choir, how many people, once they saw one person have the choir at their funeral, they thought, boy, that's what I'm going to do. You know, they sang in the choir back 20 years ago. I'm going to see if I get the choir there. Vocalists, you know, again, music's and song quality control is you're at their mercy. It's not like you have chosen, right? And, you know, Granny may have yodeled well at the Christmas get-together, but it doesn't mean that that's the best person to sing at a funeral. Obituary, I would say, you know, who is best right now? If they are well connected to a funeral home, they'll usually take care of that, but we need to at least register it in case that's not there. Pallbearers, I'd say this, only if the family requests. Don't make them feel like they have to have pallbearers, you know, especially if they're emotionally distraught and this, but some they just volunteer it and you're meeting with them. And so there's two kinds, there's active and honorary. Maybe all the people, especially if it's an older person, everyone that would want is a pallbearer, someone who couldn't carry, you know, a casket or whatever. So honorary would be the best. And what's their role in the case of cremation? What I've usually done there, usually there's like a table at the front of where you're going to have your little funeral or memorial gathering, and you just have the urn there, you know, vase, the urn, and then a picture, usually is a picture of the deceased there. And then when they head out, just have the family member or that's part of the pallbearers or whatever, take that urn and just carry it out. You know, I just did that in Nova Scotia with my brother who was cremated. Now, identify any favorite scriptures and songs, and listen for comments and characteristics that will help you personalize your message. You know, I would suggest not asking what their favorite memory is. Like, who has a favorite? Like, if they got 30 favorite memories and they're on the spot and they're not going to choose the right one. They're going to go home in the car later and say, I wish I'd have said. So I just ask, you know, what's something that you remember about that person? And I listen for more characteristics than incidents. Listen for them, because you can include, it's so easy just to include them in and personalize your brief message. And of course, engage care support. If they're part of community groups, they'll probably already be well taken care of. But you know, again, there's such a wide range here. I can't cover every range, but just you'll know how to engage some kind of care support. And then a communication plan. It's easy if it's a well-known person or a leader in the church. You've got the email list there already to notify and the time of the service and all that. But you know, work with the pastoral care people just to find out how best to do it in your situation. All right, tributes. All right. Do you know that public speaking is the number one fear for people? I just wish the right people had it. Anyway, it's time to be aware of those who, oh, Pastor, can I just want to say a few words. Lord, help you. In that moment, really, tributes, I call them the wild card of funerals. They're usually the best and the worst moments of the gathering. They can be the very best. They can just be really something you'd like to forget, Inappropriate comments can be made. The length is a big thing. I remember one of our elders here, Tony Alves, I asked how the funeral service went. I wasn't there for it. And he said, there was this one woman and she didn't know when to stop. And she just kept going on and on with the tribute. And people would think she'd ended and they start to clap, saying, thank you, good, and she'd be inspired by that clapping to just go right back into it again. So I don't know how they resolved that, whether they clapped when she went off the platform or they just decide not to clap anymore. I didn't hear how that, but length is a huge thing. And pastors are the worst. If you have pastors invited to a wedding, they're used to public speaking. They always go outside what they're asked to do. Always. I've done tons of funerals for well-known pastors in the Pentecostal assemblies and they refer to every contact they've ever had with this person, anyway. All right. So emotions are raw, and so you've got this emotional grief plus nervousness, and that's quite a combo. Plus the participants not used to public speaking. So here's the guidelines I give. I give these every chance I get. Matter of fact, if I had to make contact with people to plan the funeral, I'll try and get a hold of the key tribute givers more than other people. Just because I want that to be written down, I want it to be timed. At least if you've asked that, you've done everything you can. And then you have to go with the flow in the moment. And in the moment, it's good to bring this. Really, I found helpful. Bring up tribute makers in groups. If it's all the grandchildren are going to say something, number one, they know each other. And so it's like we're here together. It's not like I'm walking up and it's a time saver. I love seamless transitions and people being ready for when they're at the microphone next. But it's just also puts on them a sense of, I'm not the only one giving a tribute. Let me get my words out and in a meaningful way and move on. There's others waiting. Be ready to come alongside or remain standing if they or you are. When did I write this? Or you are nervous. I'm thinking of nervous of what they're going to say. But I found that very helpful, especially if it's kids or someone that's not used to it. They just appreciate, and then you could be there just to sort of give them a little side hug and provide a Kleenex if they need it. You can just be there just to help them. And if they get stuck, ask a question that helps them end the tribute well. Some people just get so choked up, they just can't talk, So I just give them a few yes or no. All they have to do is say, nod your head, yes or no, and then just we thank you. And then you just let them go off the platform kind of thing.
What would be an example of a yes or no that you would ask?
Depending on what they've been talking about, but say it's a little kid, your grandmother meant a whole lot to you, didn't she? And they do, yes. And that's why you have tears today, because you cared about her. Thank you, sweetheart. And then off the platform, you know what I mean? Just that kind of thing. If it's old people, just push them off. No, I don't. No, you know what I'm saying? Adapt to what they've said. Man, here's if it was a guy who got choked up and couldn't continue, I'd say, you know what? You would not be in this emotional state if Joe hadn't meant so much to you. I think that's saying a whole lot more than whatever words you may have just said right now. Bless you. Thank you for this. And then people clap. People are so supportive and clap. Yeah. And then they're off. You know what I mean? You take away the awkwardness and you support the person in that moment, Video tributes are great. You know, the advantages, sometimes significant people can't be there. That's very practical, but they also help with quality control and length, as we know in all of our video contributions around here. And of course, they can be mixed with pictures. All right, announcements. Make the least possible verbal announcements, especially if it involves addresses and times. People will come up to you, oh, Pastor Keith, please announce, and tell them this address and go in through the side door on the 3rd level of the 5th building. People aren't even going to remember. So I always say, when I meet with them, make sure anything to do with addresses and times and where you want donations to go, have it in the bulletin, So make maximum use of the bulletin for reception time, location, address of grave site gathering, intermediate instructions regarding donations to charities. People, listen, if you are the one that announces it, people will come and ask you for what you said, and you won't be there for the family. Whenever possible, let the funeral director make pre-gathering announcements and post-gathering announcements for all things logistical. If something comes up, you say, oh, listen, before the gathering starts, the family wants this announced. Because again, your job is to bring pastoral comfort and the scriptures and prayer. You're not to be the announcer. You know what I mean? Of all things logistical. Music and vocalists. Something I don't think I put in here, but have a comfort level with your accompanist if you're leading. And if you're not leading, have a good sort of like with these tribute people, have an understanding with the person that's leading that that's what they're there to do, not to give a tribute and to lead, because often they're chosen because they have a good, strong voice and can lead people in songs. Faith songs are great. I think we understand choruses and hymns that might be meaningful. Life songs. It's all about placement in the gathering. I just did a memorial service for my brother, and my sister-in-law said to me, she said, David and I had our song. I don't know, Keith, if there's a way to include it. I said, well, what is it? And it was, you're my inspiration.
Oh,
Chicago, yeah. So I said, of course, Darlene, it's a service for you. So we put it on after her son had just made a tribute, and right before I was doing, because I knew I can segue it, right? I get the chance to sort of, and so as soon as I said, do you know why we heard that song? That was David and Darlene's song. He'd wind it up on the stereo when she'd come in the driveway, so that was their song. So it gives you obviously there's perimeters and there's limitations thematically, lyrically, and whatnot, but normally someone's going to come up with a song. Another idea is to play it before the gathering. You don't want to place it where it becomes the end-all song. Be very careful. Maybe a good faith song is what you'd want to have at the end of the service. You don't want to maybe just sort of bring it to that level when you've already got people looking to God and the scriptures and your message of comfort. And placement of songs. You just listen to the theme, the style, the lyrics. And songs, like I say, is no different than a church gathering. Songs either set up what's next or they seal what's just happened. At the end of the gathering or accompanying tributes, great time to have a song. Just to seal the deal or to set up what's next. Congregational singing, I really feel strong about this, and I bring it up, it'll probably get into weddings too, but prioritize unbelievers. They can often feel marginalized, but it also can be done in a way that is meaningful if it's handled well. I think I did put, down a little further. Most of us may not know this song, so some of us may just want to listen to a favorite song of Darlene's. You know what I mean? You just sort of maximize the comfort level in the room. And then social media pics and videos. It's all about placement prior to the gathering as people are waiting during a chosen song. Pastor John and I talk about this with some frequency, how thankful we are that we've staffed a church that has good logistical support, and that especially is true when it comes to media and sound. Oh, I was just did one not too long ago at a funeral home I've been at many times, and they live stream. So this is getting we'll get into that, but it's very common now to live stream funerals. But they also had some video that was supposed to come up, and look at all the staff at the funeral home have to do is press play, right? Except they should have tested everything out ahead of time, so that all they had to do is press play. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. I wasn't exasperated at all. I just smiled, and I forget because it's a moment where people want things done at least well. They want things done right. They don't want technical gaps and these sorts of things. So I did try and fill it in as best I could, but there's only so much you can do. Microphones. Oh yeah, by the way, fixed is best for multiple, often inexperienced participants. You please don't get people go up there where they're trying to get the mic off and the next one, and then if you're stuck with that, get up there and you one hand on, pull it off, and then when they're done, you put it back on or hand it to the next person. It is unfair to ask people that aren't used to this they got enough on their mind to do already. And so live stream, yeah, now you know where that line comes from. Arrangements with competent staff. That's where that one comes from. I told the story first. Video link, it really can magnify the witness, and it's best to include at opportune moment. Oh yeah, best to include. What I'm saying there is, if you've got people that you're live streaming, refer to them, include them here and there. Just not a lot, but just 2 or 3 times throughout the gathering. We're going to pray now, whether you're in this room or you're joining us live stream. This is a special moment. We're going to pray for the family right now, and you're helping us support them in prayers. You pray with us right now, that kind of thing, just in that moment. Visitation. Okay, what I mean by visitation is, I've noticed they used to call it, what did the Irish used to call it? The wake. And it had a lot of stuff happen that you wouldn't want to have training on. And then, but before that, it was before visitation. Pastor Adrian, are you old enough to know the term? What do they used to call that? The funeral home. Anyway, you all know what I'm talking about. Like the viewing. Yeah, viewing. You know what? That goes back to those Irish. You got to watch out for those Irish, I tell you. It's like viewing. You go and there's the dead body, So it just, anyway, it just does not. So visitation. Call it visitation. It's a big, big, big pastoral connection opportunity. Man, oh man, I think that it's a wonderful opportunity. You're meeting so many people, and it can be so meaningful. And you're meeting the extended family. Here's the way I usually do it. I usually find the person. The last one I would have done this with would have been Pat and Juanita Gillis up in Markham, and I just said, oh. I can't remember, it was Pat or Juanita. I think it was Juanita. I said, Juanita, can you, I don't know the family. I probably met them before, but can you introduce? And right away, it just brought me around one the other. And then you have that meaningful contact. And then you're not, boy, some pastor he just walked right by me. You know what I mean? You're not leaving them with that kind of taste in their mouth. And it's just a wonderful opportunity to get around people. And also, who's singing tomorrow? I haven't met them. Who's singing, and so he gives you a chance to go to that musician and say, now listen, I'm not going to call you up. When I'm praying, or you get in position, there's the microphone, and then you're going to see them the next day anyway. But you still, you get as much in there as you can. If you meet a tribute maker, you know what to say to them. And then another thing I always try and do is just, and I'm probably the last person you'd think of would do this, but I go and I check the church's flower quality. I guess the only reason I do that is because I've heard from so many people, and I don't even live in that room. I don't even know if there's flowers in the room. I really don't. But I've heard from so many people the flowers that the church has sent, they were, I was a bit awkward about that. Our church sent those. Some people live in a world where this is important to them. Okay. And again, it's just like an encouragement when someone's low. Flowers can mean a lot. And if it's not representing the church well in terms of quality presentation, then we need to be aware of that and pass it on to the right people. Funeral, memorial, celebration of life gathering. So now I'm taking you to the gathering itself, okay? So first thing you want to do is check with the funeral director. What do you want to go over? Well, you cover the things we have here. How you and the family and pallbearers will enter the room at the service time. You don't want to be jumbled or whatever. You want to just have it clean, simple, organized, where he or she will ask attenders to stand as the family enters. That's in a lot of larger funerals, especially if it's someone well-known, that's common. So you need to be aware of that. So who's going to ask them to stand? Guess who I tell you that to. Why don't you do that? We're on the way. And I don't want my first words to be, would the congregation please stand? Well, okay. They're just sitting there and I didn't want to be the one that jolts them. If you want to meet with family for prayer, before the service, ask the funeral director to announce such a few minutes before the service to commence. He'll go in. They'll just know. She'll go in. She'll say, in a few moments, pastor is going to come and pray just with the family, and we invite you to make your way to. They'll know, to the place where we'll be gathering for the service, and then this can be. But don't feel you have to do that. Don't feel you have to. Just read, adapt. Adaptation is the key to doing funerals. But I'd need to include everything in here so at least you can know what you can delete and be watching out for. The casket, is it already in the room, or is it going to be brought in by the funeral home staff? That makes a big difference as to how you walk in with the family. So you need to know that. Is it casket or cremation? I mentioned already, cremation, a good way to handle it. Always try and have a picture and a table up front with the urn there, just so it helps family bring closure. Just to say, oh yeah, okay, it really did happen. You know what I mean? So, and the funeral, a wink is as good as a nod to a blind horse. You could just say that to the funeral director and they know exactly what to do. They'll just take care of that for you. Now, this is important. I have seen a couple caught off guard here. Discuss your cue for the closing of the service with the funeral director and their involvement. The pallbearer announcements for reception or graveside, you want to make sure they know when they're coming up. And then discuss the exit. If you're up there on the platform with several, clergy, pastors, or whoever is there with you, I'll always discuss with them, listen, when we say amen and we're done our part, we're going to go down and we're going to go down to I'm trying to adapt to any room that you're in, but down to where the urn or the casket is, and then walk out far enough if there are pallbearers to allow them lots of room to get organized. The funeral director will step in. I'd like to invite the pallbearers to please come, and they'll get them all organized. Don't get involved in that. Just stand back and let them do their thing. When they're all ready, then you can turn around. And by the way, you're not facing the people at this time. You turn around and you watch what's going on. You're facing that way, and you turn around and you lead the procession out. When you go outside of the building, every building's different. If you're in a funeral home, it'll be easy. They'll just sort of direct you. But if you're in a church, the best is to go out into the lobby. And sometimes what my job is just to hold the door for the casket to come through. And people don't know what to do. And so you've just got to sort of lead the way and keep the thing moving. It's not our time to stop and visit with the family in the lobby. Right. This is different from a guy. So go right out to the funeral car and go from there. And if it's family, and there's keeping the casket because they're going to do a graveside service later in another city, then you just lead the family out and help them move on to their next thing, whether it's a family gathering or a little luncheon at the church or whatever. You just sort of act like they're security. They're just be there with them just to sort of help them move forward.
Pastor Keith,
Mhm.
that moment if the family I've encountered times with families very emotional at that moment.
Mhm.
How would you handle that moment? They're just really, someone's very distraught and doesn't want to leave the casket. Would you step in there and pastor, or how would you?
Yeah, here's what I've learned. Let them get some emotions out. Don't move in too early, but you're quite right, Pastor Jessica. Then there's a moment. Okay, enough already. And you just move in and you put your arm around them. You can either pray with them or whatever. Okay, we're going to head out now. And you don't lose your hug. We're going to head out, and you go like this and then you walk with them. They're coming with you. You know what I mean? Because otherwise they're holding up everything. And like you say, people do strange things when they're that distraught and in that state of emotions and grieving. Yeah, well, anything else to discuss? Yeah, just how it's all going to end. You just want to feel that it's simple and clear in your mind when you're going in, so you aren't left out there saying, what am I supposed to do now? And then I say, meet with the family, optional, but it's often meaningful. Sometimes you gather the family around in a circle. I've said this, knowing if the majority are followers of Christ, and I know more than anything that your dad, your mom would want every one of you to be able to say that they have a relationship. It may not look like what mom and dad have, but a relationship with Jesus, because he's the only one that really can help us at a time like this, and then you just pray. You don't I remember my sister said to me one time, and she was at a funeral where we were a family member, and she brought it up when we were in Halifax this time. She said she remembered and she felt she was being preached to. We have to be careful if we're speaking that we're loving every person that's there, the unbeliever, the family member that's not serving Jesus. You can be real, you can be forthright, but you don't create an us and them. You do not. Jesus would not want that. He would not do that unless they were Pharisees. Okay. Because they know better. All right. Lead pallbearers into the family gathering. And we talked about getting that all organized. Minimize the travel time during service for participants. Again, that's no different. But, you can say things like, 2 of the children are coming now. Or, a lifelong friend and so are coming now to share tributes, and they're both there. One's waiting on the other, and I tell them it doesn't matter when you're done, you want to leave the platform, fine. If you want to wait for your friend, fine. But that part doesn't matter. But getting them up there together does make a difference.
Pastor Keith,
Mm-hmm.
when do you discuss that? Like, when do you discuss all of those transitions with the tribute and the family?
It depends. If I haven't, so much depends, Steph, on the size. Sometimes you're talking about 30 people or less. Sometimes you're talking about 800 people. So I would handle it totally differently. If it was a larger gathering, I meet with them before the service. Everyone that's giving a tribute or a singing, whatever, I meet with them before. But I always get around to give them specific instructions, And we haven't even got to the photographer yet, No, that's weddings. Yeah, that's wedding. Oh, brother, we've got some villains when it comes to doing weddings too. Okay, all right. And then be on standby. Oh my goodness, how can I forget this? I was right here in this room, a beautiful church family, large funeral, but there was a sister that had come from the States, and she wasn't doing well with accepting, how people get stuck in denial. And I can't remember what part of the funeral service it was, but I was up front, I was already there. It was sort of at a transition time. That's all I remember. She stood up and she said, called her sister by name that was in the casket. I say to you, arise, arise, arise. And of course, everybody's thinking, did that just happen? Everybody's like, so I just remember I was already either going to the podium or I was just there. And I just gave a couple of seconds and I said, I can't imagine what it's like to be grieving someone that you love so much, and you want them to be alive more than anything. And the good news is, matter of fact, if we're all just we're just going to go into a time where I'm going to tell you how that can happen for every one of us someday. You know, you just sort of transition it into
You just sort of do that. I would be like, oh.
So transition.
I'd be like, can I get a 5-minute break?
no, but I just remember in that moment, the Holy Spirit will help you. You know?
Pastor, just along that lines, thinking about a funeral I actually attended, you were overseeing, and there was a person giving a tribute that began to lose their way. They're just older,
Mhm,
and you moved in right beside them because your goal was that they wouldn't embarrass themselves either.
right.
When do you know to do that? And I saw you put your arm around him,
Mhm.
but what do you have a protocol or way similar to what you've just been discussing? That's a great one for the pulpit to the
Mhm,
community. But when someone's got the microphone
Yeah,
and it's starting to come off the rails,
yeah.
what's your trigger point?
Yeah, I probably would just adapt to the moment. To be honest with you, I've never thought it through,
Right.
but I would, I don't even remember what you're talking about. Don't remember the
Brother
funeral.
Lynn.
Carmen Lynn was the one that was
Yes.
doing this?
Yeah.
Right, okay. Oh, and brother, he used to be in position in the PSC, right?
His mind had just.
Oh,
he was-
yeah,
he
yeah.
was old.
I probably just went in and just helped them wrap up what was already saying,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
And I honestly can't remember that moment, but
I think it impressed me because you were honoring the dignity.
Oh,
versus so
totally.
much you were protecting him.
yeah,
That was
Yeah.
really cool to know. That for me, that was a trigger point. I noticed when
Yeah.
he started to ramble and it started to move beyond what he would normally
exactly.
be capable of.
Yeah,
He moved right in there.
yeah. And I think he felt sort of pleased with his
Right.
contribution
Yes,
too,
he
you
did,
know,
yeah.
as he toddled off. You know, I remember something about that now.
And would that be a time where you would then ask a question? Like,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If that was the right way to wrap it up.
right.
You know, or just refer back. You know, you said that when he served with you in such and such, you know, isn't that's a challenge to every one of us in this room, isn't it? Thank you so much for saying that, you know? Yeah.
Awesome.
It's never forgetting your role in the room. You were the pastor in the room.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And how they perceive Jesus, you know, it can actually be reflected in the way you handle things, you know. Anyway, sample order of service. So I'm going to leave this for you here. Those are just some, you know, they don't all have to, all those elements don't have to be there. It can be a very small group. You know, your job is to do what's meaningful for that person in terms of comforting those who mourn and reaching unbelievers, you know, so whatever best allows that to happen. And then planning your message and comments. Again, grieving family and unbelievers. They're your priority groups. I think the length can range from 5 to 15 minutes, especially if you've had a tribute that didn't know how to end, you know, and they've used up a lot of time. I encourage you, use fresh, warm, understandable language. Talk to people who are new to this. I don't know how many times at funerals and weddings I've had people say, man, I understood everything you said, you know, or I didn't know it could be, you know, where is this church kind of a thing that you pass? But it's only because you try and do what Jesus would want done there. People can tell when you care and when you're trying to communicate the best truths they could ever hear, but in ways that they can understand, you know. So yeah, I say 5 to 15 minutes. 15 minutes is a range. I think most of them would be around the 15 minutes to really have a chance to communicate the gospel and personalize it. Now, I'm just going to give you some examples. I thought, how could I help you best? And you know, I've done all of these that you're going to see, but just examples for content development. You know, a suicide. You know, I've been there, man, and you know, it's the elephant in the room, right? So you just say something like this. You just say, I cannot imagine what so-and-so has gone through in their life. None of us know exactly what anybody else goes through. And if someone has a physical problem, they die of cancer, we're all praying, we're caring. But if someone has a mental situation that just gets the best of them, we need to give the family the compassion. And we need to understand that God knows all the facts. You and I may know this and that. He knows everything. And if anybody is loved so-and-so, it was Jesus. Let me tell you how I know that. And then you go into the gospel. He died on the cross, and he gave his life. Every one of us, he did this. So you handle it that way. Infant, I think every infant, it's tough. Oh, it's tough. I did one with twins one time, but that were lost just after birth. But here's the scripture I use. Where King David, the first child he had with Bathsheba, you'll remember David went into the temple and he pled with God for the life of the child. And then after the child went ahead and died anyway, the servants came to him and said, the child, they were afraid to tell him, but the child has died. And he went back and he ate and they said, unusual behavior here. And he said, well, while the child was alive, I thought, and then he said this, listen, he says, he will not come to me, but I will go to him. Yeah. Boy, it almost brings tears to me because I'm in that moment with those parents in that room right now. Anyway, the prime of life person. I remember Marianne Bernhardt, she lost her brother. He's in his 30s. And I said, Lord, what am I going to say? He had been brought up in the church. No one knew where he was at. And so I remember I just said that, every one of us here, and he had a lot of, young people will have a whole lot of people at their funeral, especially if they're well known. The older they get, the less peer group they have, right? Smaller the funerals get. Even if they made a huge contribution to the human race, there are not many around that remember them. So anyway, so I remember that I said, every one of us is gripped by the tragedy of someone cut down in the prime of life. Here he was in his 30s and went on and on about his life and that. And I said, you know what it made me think of? The greatest injustice of all, of a man in his 30s that was taken out in the prime of life, but he did it for you and me. And his name is Jesus. And you go into the gospel, you just share the truth of the gospel. Tragedy or a sudden death. I often deal with the timing issue there. None of us will know when. Now with assisted death, so you just ignore that. None of us will know when, but every one of us can know we're ready. Every one of us can know we're ready. Here's how we know you're ready. You see, you go into the God, you comfort those who mourn, but then you've got a sacred opportunity, responsibility to share the good news of Jesus. A slow, painful death. Listen, outwardly we are wasting away, but inwardly we are renewed day by day. This person in the last few years, maybe we did not know them, they did not know us, but in that person was a spirit and that is at home with God. You can deal forthrightly with the reality, the elephant in the room, but you dignify and you minister to the people with reality, but you bring them into the gospel. The spirit can be healthy even when our minds are broken. You can say things like that, just help bring people into that time. Special community, police, dignitary, community tragedy. I remember my only time I was ever on the CTV news with Lloyd Robertson, whoever it was when I helped with it was a huge gathering. A tornado had ripped through Edmonton, Alberta, and a lot of people died in the community had this thing. And I was invited because I was head of the evangelical ministerial to be there. And it was one of those moments. You had all the different religious people put their prayer mat down and do their little dance or whatever they did in their prayer. And then just to go up and to say, dear Lord Jesus, thank you that we are loved by you. We know we're loved by you because of what you did for us. You know what I mean? And you've been through so many moments, even in gospel times, where tragedy happened, and you're here with the family in these tragedies. And you just, you pray for the family that's in that room. And they don't know what to do. They don't know what to do when you're done. You know what I mean? By the way, Esther was videotaped back in Edmonton, and she videotaped right over my one moment on national television. Videotape something with you guys playing soccer or something. I don't know. Anyway, I almost have forgiven her. All right. So yeah, and then a police funeral here in Toronto. Listen, be real. Don't get don't worry about, you're only there to please Jesus. You know what we always tell people that when they're baptized, they only have an audience of one. Please Jesus, but treat people with dignity, but be real. Be Jesus in that moment. Be a little light in that service. You know what I mean? I remember the police funeral I did here, the chaplain showed up drunk. You know what I mean? He was so nervous. He was obviously drunk, And, but I took a moment again, just to say, my dad was a policeman, and we always wondered, and you family, you're going through it. And, you can make it, you can bring dignity and bring Jesus into that moment, All right. And then a celebration of life. They're the easy ones, right? Listen, don't hold back. If someone has gone to be with Jesus, yes, handle it with class and dignity, but don't pretend that heaven isn't real and they aren't there. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Go there. Go. Be excited and be pleased about that. All right. The committal graveside. Often it's on the day of the funeral, but sometimes because of winter in Canada or because it's in a different city, it's later. By the way, I have to tell you this. I used to be on a national committee with Herb Barber, Pastor Jonathan would know him. He was at Calvary Temple in Winnipeg, which had a big television audience and all that forever. And he was on this committee with me, and I had nothing to do in the evenings after supper, right? I flew in from Edmonton or Ottawa, wherever it was. And so I'd get them telling stories, these old crusty ministerial guys. And I'd say, whatever happened? And so that's what I asked him. I said, whatever happened at a funeral that was like really unusual? He said, wow, I was at the graveside and a fight broke out. I said, you mean, yeah, the families on each side, they started to fight. You mean physically fight? Yep, one of them fell right down in the grave hole, and so I'm killing myself laughing. I'm saying, because he's not the kind of person you would ever hear talk like this or have this happen. So I said, Pastor Barber, I said, what did you do? Well, I just waited until they were done, and then I proceeded with the service. There's times where liturgy can help you. It's there he was. But listen, if it's right after the funeral service, it can be very brief. I don't think it's any longer than 10, 15 minutes. If it's held at a later date, you got to refer back to the main thoughts that were there at the funeral service. You got to tie that in. I'd say, it could be 20 minutes longer. If it's that. But again, the pre-service, they'll always ask you this. If you're sitting in the back seat of the funeral car, they say, will you be using sand? Now you're going to know what to say. First time they said it to me, I don't know, we're using sand. Like, what is that? Because they want to know, are you going to say ashes to ashes, dust to dust? But the spirit returns to the God who gave it. They want to know if you're going to use that line. So if so, they will take their big moment, right? They pour sand out and then they put it in the shape of a cross on the casket, this kind of thing. So, and you know what? I usually do that. I usually do that. Just adds a little something, takes a few seconds, but adds a little, and they do it in the form of a cross, which is nice. And so anyway, it's, and it gives you a chance to say that, about the spirit returning.
Pastor Keith,
Yeah.
Do
do you have resources that you turn to for more liturgical elements like that? Like I know some prayer books have.
Yeah, I gave you a handout. Let's look at it now.
We're talking.
Yeah, it's on the, on one side are some of my favorite scriptures for funerals. And, oh yeah, and look at up here, here's a top left-hand corner. And if you're watching my video, you'll get these handouts too. This will be helpful. But you see how you just say, so-and-so is not here. She stands in the presence of the Lord who said to the one, and so you go right into that kind of, this can be something that you can use to write in your own words. On the other side, I just often, if you saw my notes that I got this from, there's no way even Jan Moken could read them. You know what I mean? And she had the gift of interpretation. She could read stuff I couldn't read. But anyway, I just pulled out a few things there. This is an occasion that usually is associated with saying your last goodbyes, leaving someone. The gravesite is called the final resting place. But like every other important part of the human experience, Jesus Christ changes all of that. It's the moment. It's such a moment this is a gospel moment. It's the good news of Jesus moment. It was at the occasion he said, I am the resurrection. Now, Paul gets into a lot of things there where, that don't feel you have to use all the scriptures that he gave to his first audience, because we're talking to an audience today that some of it requires teaching to be understood. And it's not a moment for teaching. It's just a moment of declaration of the gospel. So the honest reality is this. You can sort of hear more casual language now than the more formal one, Matt, that was on the other side.
Yeah.
So the honest reality is this is not Joe's final resting place, because absent from, and so we're not saying goodbye today. We're saying see you. You see what I'm saying? You can just so I'm giving you some examples there and some scriptures to help out with the graveside service.
So good.
That's gold.
Yeah, thank you.
Save that.
Oh, good. Oh yeah, and then and Matt, look at C, handout for adaptation. Like you timed that perfect. Thank you for your support, keeping me on track here. And then prayer. You're praying. I always try and think of how will each prayer be different. I try to not use the same benediction that I use at the church at the gravesite. So my brothers, stand firm, let nothing move you, knowing that your labor in the Lord is not in vain. There's different ones that are made for committal services. They're made for funerals, So if I have them in the back of my Bible, just sitting there, so I can just turn to the one that seems to fit the most. That Jesus Christ, that great shepherd of the sheep who rose from the dead. They just fit with these moments.
Could we have a digital copy of some of those verses for benedictions?
For
They're
sure.
great for a lot of settings we might be
Okay, benedictions.
called into.
I
Really
have,
good to have.
I have a set of them already.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we could share that as part of it.
You have them?
Yeah.
Good.
I can run it by you if there's any that are missing. but-
Yeah, I might have added a few over time, but thanks, Matt. Thank you. That'd be great.
For some of you guys, I took this from Pastor Keith, and in the back of each of my teaching books I have copies of the benedictions there that I can pull it out in a different circumstance. I can quickly scan which one might best fit. But I got that from Pastor Keith. They're valuable to have.
Yeah.
And do you normally end the service with a benediction, or do you normally do the benediction at the gravesite?
All right. It depends. And I wonder if I dealt with this, but often today, people don't have a graveside the same way that years ago in Canada, a lot of people did. Oftentimes there is, so I always ask the family, are you going to have a graveside or a committal service? And it's cultural too. You can, in an Italian family, you can actually go to a place where they put them in vaults and then they seal it right up. They pull out caulking right in front of you, and here, a builder like me, I'm thinking, what's the brand name on that? I'm supposed to be having a funeral service, you know what I mean? So they actually, and you see all the logistics happening right before your eyes, and all the people just stand there and watch and stare, So you just have to adapt to that. But I would say this, often today, it is good to do a committal benediction at the end of the funeral service, because so few people go to the graveside, and usually that's as it should be. It's only family. But if they're not doing anything there, and that's happening more and more now, then it's nice to sort of say, now we commit our dearly beloved so-and-so to you, Lord. Depending on whether they're a Christian or not, you find ways of wording it, but we await that day when we'll all be united in heaven with you because of what you did for us on the cross. So you find a way of bringing closure that they're not going to get at the gravesite. You do it at the end of the funeral service, just that moment of closure. Now often, here, again, people do not know what to do at the graveside. So when I pray, and then people just stand there. So what do you do? So I go to every member of the family, and be careful because they're usually crowded right around if it's a casket. I go around and I go to the key members of the family. If it's a spouse, the kids, whatever, you just go and you just give them, whether your comfort level, how well you know them. You can give them a good handshake and just say, bless you. And it's been a privilege to be part of a special day in your family, this kind of thing. And then you just, because it sort of gives like an official ending, because people are standing there, they do not know what to do. Now, a flower on the casket option, this is something I've noticed happens quite a bit these days. They'll take the family flower presentation, and then they'll go and give each member of the family a flower to put on the grave. Not bad, bring some closure and all that. So if they're going to do that, though, or as soon as you go around and greet the family, that's when they should do that right then. And then I wrote down here, gently head to the funeral car. People do not know what to expect or when to leave. Your departure gives them permission to begin leaving. If you just, and you read the moment. I just stand there for a bit, just to see the family. And then when I see that, now what are we going to do? When I see that moment come, I just head to the funeral car, and it just sometimes creates a little bit of a permission to head out of there.
Pastor Keith,
Mm-hmm.
do you head to the funeral? Do you head to the gravesite with the family?
No, usually, sometimes, depending on how well I know them. But if they've paid for the funeral car anyway, then usually you're up there with the funeral director that's in charge of that particular funeral, and you're seated up there with them. It's a great chance to witness to them too. It's just a great time. What are some of the, I get them into their funeral stories, and I'll just throw in there, for me, I've done a lot of them too. And, what gets me is the difference between someone who really does know the gospel and doesn't. Because when you really know, it changes everything. And it's just a wonderful time to witness to them. Here's just an idea. We did this with my dad, and that is do the graveside first. This is just more for you, or if you're close to people. Do the graveside first, and then the celebration of life after. It's just something so meaningful about being together as a family and committing that loved one, to the ground, and reminding yourselves of the scriptures. Is like, okay, that's done. And then you go off to the celebration of life,
Do you always go to that celebration of life too thing?
No, sorry. What I meant by celebration of life mean the funeral service.
Oh,
In other words, you have your committal service. That's what we do with my dad. We had like a committal service, and then we went back and had the funeral or celebration of life service.
sorry, I thought you meant like a reception.
Yeah. Do I always go to the receptions? It all depends. I'd go to the same ones you would. They were a deacon with you. They were a faithful person in the church for years versus I don't know them. But sometimes if I have the time, funerals, unlike weddings, are often during the week. They're not Saturdays and Sundays. So it gives you a little more liberty with your schedule sometimes when you do 3 or 4 weekend services to be with the family. I love the follow-up at the end of the service with people who don't know Jesus. I just prioritize them, and you just let them talk. They don't know what to do. It was a great. That's where I get those comments. Yeah, that was a great show. I've never been at a funeral quite like that before, and all that. And you say, well, what I love about it is it's true. Yeah, I'm a pastor. It's supposed to be the professional clergy here, but this is for me too. Jesus died for me, and it's it's amazing how the Holy Spirit can work in those moments. I just love that part of it. A few observations. Yeah, trend towards cremation. No surprise, but it's more casual. But I think that you need to lead the way. People, look, I'll never forget this one guy. Last words to his dad. Guess what they were? I was there because he died after that. He taps him on the foot as he's leaving the hospital room, and he goes, tough nut. Last words to his dad. He didn't know they would be. But it was his way, I guess, of just sort of saying, hang in there or something. I don't know what he was saying. But it just talking about getting casual. Like he was a bit casual. But we can't, here's what I'm saying, don't feed denial. People are in shock and denial. Encourage good memories to be expressed. What do you remember? What's something that you remember about your so-and-so? Get them, talking. Because I found this too. Often in funerals now, laughter is used. The funny incidents versus, you know what I'm talking about? Okay, you guys understand. Versus meaningful, because it's a way of avoidance.
Right.
Yeah. So I feel I'm a steward of trying to bring in the meaningful moments. It's giving people permission to grieve in a healthy way and not just laugh it off or just get on to my busy day and tough nut and here I'm out of here. I'm just this is a huge trend. Huge. Many attend the visitation but not the funeral service. Matter of fact, if I'm not doing the funeral, I'll prioritize the visitation time simply because I get more witnessing and pastoring done. Yeah. The older people are, smaller the attendance. Honor guard, we from this place, Dr. Rotz taught in the Bible College, and Pastor Charles, you came in from Montreal for Pastor Charles Yates. And if it's a staff member, you can do an honor guard, you can call it whatever you want, but everyone that was taught by Dr. Rotz, I'm going to invite you as we sing this next verse, just to allow room for everyone to go by, but just line the aisles. Man, it helps those people feel that they're grieving, but with a celebration. I forget what I said when Charles Yates, but I know I would have done the same thing. If you've served on staff, whether at the national office or here at our church, come in line. Like it's just sort of like a celebration moment, right? Meaningful.
And so you just have them line in the aisle?
On the sides of the aisle.
The main
Yeah.
aisle.
The main aisle of where the casket's going to go.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Never heard of that.
No, I hadn't either. I think it was for Dr. Rotz. I just thought, you know what? Why not? That would I knew him well. He taught me in Bible college, And so I just thought, and the people had traveled in from all over Ontario, maybe Canada too. So I just wanted I just thought of that in the moment, I think. And Holy Spirit's help. Listen, no one's more interested in how people are doing spiritually than Jesus and his Spirit. I wanted to just tell this story of how I had neighbors at Bridlewood. One committed suicide. She committed suicide. I was asked to do her funeral. And then a couple of years later, her husband died, not suspiciously at all. It seemed to be just old age or whatever. But the family knew me. So would you come do his funeral? So I did. And it was right down at, Shepherd Avenue there, the Ogdens. And it was Saturday night, a gathering. We had a Saturday night gathering, we called it here. It was in the sanctuary, and it was Saturday afternoon. But I thought, oh Lord, just help me. And so I knew I wouldn't have much time just to get up here. And I don't know, Jonathan knew who was leading, but could have been someone that under your leadership. And I just said, keep the service going till I get there, and just keep singing or whatever. But I got there at the funeral home, and it was very casual. It was like this kind of a room, except 5 times or 10 times the size. People, neighbors, and people were milling around and all that. There was memorabilia of the person's life, set at tables so people could see it. And then the son, very sweet family, and his son said, I've asked Pastor Keith come to say a few words. And there were some couches in the room and all that. The one guy that typified what was happening in the room more than anybody was him. He's a great big guy, and he just put his arms like this, rolled his eyes, as if said, here comes the boring part. You got to see it on him, So like, no, I'm not going to pick on Americans right now. But anyway, it just was, and that was the mood in the room. Oh, boy, I guess we got to do the religious thing, Oh, man, Esther was with me that day. I love the Holy Spirit for this moment. I said, my first words were, because he says he's going to come say a few words, and he just like leaves me. I'm there, right? Hello. And then, oh yeah, I said, can you imagine what it would be like to be the neighbor of a pastor or a priest? And, everybody's like, what the heck is he going to go with it? I said, well, that's what he was. I was his neighbor. I was next door neighbor. And anytime the topic of religion or faith would come up, it would always go like this. He'd say, I was intending to say some of this later, after I did the spiritual protocol thing, but I just jumped for the jugular. And I said, the conversation would go like this. I explained about, well, it's not church, because he'd gone to a Baptist church for Sunday school in some other city. And I said, every time the conversation would come up, it would go into that, and then he'd always end with him saying, leave it to me, I can't remember his name at this moment, but Murray, yeah. Every time Murray would say, end this way, well, I've never been much for Christianity, or whatever he said. I've never been much for Christianity. And I said it in his voice. Well, the whole room just was laughing at this point, right? And I said, and Murray, I would always say the same thing, Murray, neither am I. Because religion and Christianity have messed it up. You have to go back to the original. You have to go back to Jesus. And I shared the gospel. My goodness. Listen, I thought I'd better add some liturgy in here as I was praying at the end. So I thought, I'm going to go into the Lord's Prayer. Well, they didn't know the words, but they were clamoring over each other in that room, trying to say what little they didn't know, to show that they're with me. They're in on this. It was, and I gave opportunity. Lord, people in this room today, they may have had their bad experiences with religion, and they may not know, maybe today is the first day they've heard of what you really did when you entered human history and did this for us. And maybe they're saying yes to you right now. Be with them. You know what I mean? I left for Saturday night service on such a high, I'll never forget, because I just thought, man, Holy Spirit, you just gave me the words to say in such same hour. It was just there, Anyway, so grief care after, send them to Pastor Stephen. No. Invitation to something, we have good grief care courses around here that they could be invited. You might want to just jot it down, and then a couple of weeks go by, you touch base, how you doing? And here's the next grief care course that we're having, churches, resources. If they're in a community group or they're well plugged in, they're going to be well taken care of.
I should mention to that, Pastor Stephen and his team have put together something in which people are given a grief call. When does that happen, Stephen?
It's 2 weeks after.
Oh, nice.
6 months and a year anniversary. Because we find out when the year anniversary's passed, it's fresh in the family's mind. They're experiencing the whole thing over again. But sometimes churches have moved on, right? We've forgotten about it. So we put in Asana specific calls to make anniversaries throughout the year to connect back with the family.
Excellent.
We're thinking about you for you.
Nice. Thank you. That's so thoughtful. So good. All right. Do you want to bathroom break? Is the mic, is this off or is it still running?
Still running.
Still running? Okay. I won't tell on you, Melissa. Anyway, does anyone want to go on a mission to the bathroom?
Take a quick bathroom break.
2 minutes, and then we only have half an hour to do weddings.